So when I was starting out way back in the 90s, if you weren't going to a recording school or interning at a recording studio, it was way more difficult to figure out on your own how to record and make records. Today, pretty much everybody has access to unlimited instructional videos on YouTube, and in many ways, this has really created a new problem. I know personally, I'm always struggling with what to prioritize and where to focus my attention, and this is really what led me to the idea for this video, which is to talk about the recording process and, in my opinion, where you should be focusing your attention, and basically make the video that I wish I could have watched when I was getting started. So if you're wondering about my background, I went to Berklee College of Music, and shortly after graduation, I relocated to Chicago, where by the late 90s, I had established a busy recording studio based around an Atari 2-inch 16-track and a Soundtrax MR Series analog mixing console. During that time, I also co-produced and recorded a record for my own band that generated some label interest and eventually got assigned to Warner UK. By the early 2000s, we had recorded 3 albums for Warner's, and we were lucky enough to work with some amazing engineers and producers in some of the best studios throughout the UK. We were touring extensively, playing the summer festival circuit each year, and enjoying all the perks of being on a major label. When our time at Warner came to an end, I continued to record and produce local artists in my Chicago-based studio, eventually moving to a new space where I focused primarily on mixing and mastering. So many of you probably already have some sort of recording set up, and some of you might be literally starting from scratch with nothing. But in either case, I think it's really important to emphasize that the gear will never matter as much as the ideas and the performances. Your equipment's only job is to capture performances. So fixating on gear or chasing the perfect setup is really missing the point. You may have heard the saying, garbage in, garbage out. Well, that's also saying if it sounds great going in, it's going to sound great coming out. And I experienced this over the years working with probably hundreds of bands. On occasion, an artist would come in, we'd start tracking some basics, and immediately everything would sound significantly better than most of the sessions that I typically worked on. I was using the same gear, the same basic setup. I wasn't doing anything differently than I typically would, but it was because of the artist's songs, their arrangements, the parts were working well together, they were complementary, and their performances. And everything from that point on was easier. I wasn't struggling with trying to get instruments to sit well in the mix. I wasn't spending my time fixing problems. Everything felt like it was just falling into place. So in reality, what you might think happens in the mixing stage is also happening in the initial process, before you even hit record. Again, if the song, the arrangement, the sound of the instruments, and the performances aren't really resonating and being captured with intention, then a great mix won't rescue your recordings. So what does this mean in practical terms? Just set up a comfortable environment where you can work freely and easily with the least amount of distractions. If you're working with other artists or bands, have them come in the day before, preferably off the clock so nobody's stressed about time. Go through all the steps to set up all the instruments. Try out different drums and take the time to tune them correctly. Find the best place to situate each musician so they're comfortable. Experiment with different microphones and mic placement. Dial in the perfect headphone mixes. Get all that work out of the way so when the band comes in the next day, they can focus all their attention on capturing performances. And when you're going for takes, I think it's really important to try to focus in on getting the most authentic and natural performances. So much of how we make records today, or how we can make records today, is about doing endless amounts of takes, piling on overdubs, quantizing everything, tuning all the vocals, fixing everything to create the track, and it's really tempting to rely on those techniques. Go back and listen to some of your favorite old records. A lot of them wouldn't be made like that today with all their imperfections. But it's all the imperfections that make them so authentic and recognizable. All the character or quirks you bring as an artist or performer, your particular time feel, your phrasing, how you might push a little sharp at a climactic point in the song, all these characteristics are what make your recording unique. Although there are definitely times where you might want to fix things, try to retain as many of those authentic moments in your performance as possible. So, a few thoughts on when you get to the mixing stage. Although mixing is highly subjective, one technique that's universal and also a great habit to incorporate into your workflow is the use of reference tracks. Gather a folder of songs that you love, songs that you know sound great in a variety of listening environments. Referencing these tracks while you're mixing is a great way to calibrate your ears, to orient yourself in your mixing environment. I'm always trying to get an objective perspective or that first impression again. So I take lots of small breaks, often listening to my favorite reference tracks as a palate cleanser. Just taking a break, listening to a different song, then coming back to your mix can give you a much better perspective. I also think it's useful to approach a mix like a performance. So commit to your initial instincts, move quickly, don't get too fixated on small details or spend too much time with elements soloed. Another good habit to practice is to mix quietly. It's much easier to set the levels of instruments at lower volumes. So I spend most of my time mixing in the 70 to 80 dB range. And also remember to pull the level down on your reference tracks so the perceived volume is similar to your mix. You don't want to be chasing the levels of your mastered reference tracks. Focus on mixing, getting the level and the balance right, sign off on the mix, and put it away for a while. Come back another day, another week, and then once you come back to do the mastering, you're coming at it with a fresh perspective and a fresh ear. You're going to listen to it as a whole and have a lot more of a sense of what needs to happen. And I think although I'm an advocate for everybody doing as much as they can on their own and advancing their own skills and depending on themselves as much as they can, that's basically what I did. I think there's value in maybe involving somebody in mixing and mastering, and especially with mastering. That's the final step, the final quality control step, and you're making the final decisions, and someone that you can trust, again, that can come in with a fresh ear and maybe a listening environment that possibly hears things that you might not be hearing in your own environment. I think there's a lot to be said. You can do it yourself, but there's value in that. Shameless plug here. If you're looking for anybody to help you with mixing or mastering, my details are in the description below. Get in touch. I'd love to talk to you about your project. The last thing that I want to talk about is something that I feel like I personally experienced, and I've seen it happen over the years with so many artists and bands where you get to the end of a project and there's this kind of letdown and disappointment. There's an aspect of maybe a little panic for some people that it didn't live up to your expectations or didn't come out as good as you thought it would or you had hoped. When you're working on something that's this open-ended possibilities, and at some point you get to the end of the process and it can feel like a bit of a letdown. And I think I've witnessed people kind of freak out and go back and retrack things and retrack vocals and add parts, and then we do a mix and then they want to remix it and then we mix it again and then we master it and then they come back and they want to do a tweak and mix, or we go through all that and we think we're done, and then months later they come back and want to add something to it and go through all those steps again. And I think at some point the danger is the diminishing returns. You're accommodating that anxiety too much, and maybe you're changing things, but it's not necessarily getting better. I think there are times when you want to go back and fix things, clearly, but you do run the risk of kind of sucking the life out of your recordings. And I think, we have to remind ourselves that you're working within a window of time with the skill level you have, with the equipment you have access to, and you're doing the best you can. And at some point, you got to give yourself a little slack. And if it did fall short, maybe take those lessons and put it into the next recording. And I think your progress can really be hindered by kind of getting stuck and held captive by trying to rework something over a long period of time. And maybe this is new to some people, but this is something that really happens. And even artists that don't even release stuff because they just can't get past that point. And it's happened with me. And I think stepping back from it, coming back months or even years later to tracks, the bottom line is maybe the track wasn't that great. I had hoped it was better than it was, but it's not an A+, it's a C+. So really, my best course of action is just to finish it, put it out or not, and move on to the next, release myself from the track, be done with it, and move on. So please subscribe to my channel and leave a comment. I'd love to hear your feedback. I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Take care.